It's quite sad actually to hear, I think, some of these Russian talking points expressed as reliable by a diplomat, unless you buy into the potential explanation in Trump world, which is that there's no way anyone else is going to bring peace to the Ukraine war situation.
President Trump's top negotiator, this Steve Witkoff chap, has praised Vladimir Putin as a super smart guy. This is head of the Ukraine ceasefire talks in Saudi Arabia. He made those remarks during an interview with Tucker Carlson at the weekend. And he also called European plans for a peacekeeping force in Ukraine simplistic. And he had a go at Keir Starmer. There isn't actually a clip at that point, although there was meant to be, and I do apologise. My fault entirely, nobody else's. David, oh, it isn't my fault. Thank you very much for acknowledging that.
Do you want me to do an impersonation?
I was prepared to take the blame.
Still a smart guy.
That's it. Good. David Charter is the Times assistant US editor. OK, David, I mean, it's sometimes very difficult to know where to start, but we're going to start, I think, with the Tucker Carlson, Steve Witkoff encounter. To most British ears, this is really uncomfortable and actually quite infuriating. How has it gone down in the States?
Yeah, I think that there's been quite a deafening silence on the Republican side about this because the whole of the party, as you know, pretty much has been captured by Trump and the MAGA movement, the Make America Great Again movement. And Steve Witkoff, who is the envoy we're talking about here, who's given this long interview where he's dismissed Sir Keir Starmer's joint efforts with President Macron to build a peacekeeping force as a posture and a pose. Witkoff is a right-hand man of Trump and knows his mind extremely well because he's an old friend of his from the property scene in New York. In fact, he's got no diplomatic experience or government experience. He was brought in by Trump to be actually his envoy to the Middle East. But he's gained this extra role, which is going to visit President Putin a couple of weeks ago and now telling an American broadcast journalist who is very sympathetic to Russia, that's Tucker Carlson, formerly of Fox News, that basically he went to see Putin. Putin had commissioned a lovely portrait of Trump. We may come back to this subject later.
Yes.
He commissioned a lovely portrait of Trump, which he'd brought back, and Trump was very touched by it. And he'd also told Witkoff how on the day of the assassination attempt, when Trump was winged by a bullet in the ear last year, that Putin, not because Trump was perhaps in line to become president, but because he felt a great friendship with Trump, he went to see his priest and they prayed together for Trump. And Witkoff was very moved by this gesture and took it as a sign of sincerity.
Right.
I mean, really wants to get along and do the right thing.
This really is just cobblers, isn't it, David?
It's quite sad, actually, to hear, I think, some of these Russian talking points expressed as reliable by a diplomat, unless you buy into the potential explanation in Trump world, which is that there's no way anyone else is going to bring peace to the Ukraine war situation. It's only Trump who has got talks going since he came back into office, and he needs to win the trust and confidence of Putin to bring the war to an end. And this is all part of that. But it does seem to be going extraordinarily far towards the Russian side, the Russian view of the entire conflict for that explanation to hold water.
Right. I suppose we must, in the interest of fairness, acknowledge that there hadn't been any progress towards peace between Russia and Ukraine, had there? So at least now there are these meetings going on in Saudi.
That's right. As we speak, a Russian delegation and a Ukraine delegation are actually in the same building, I believe. in Saudi Arabia, with US officials shuttling between them on the subject of the next phase of a partial ceasefire. So President Putin did not agree, unlike President Zelensky, to Trump's proposals for a 30-day ceasefire. But Putin, you recall, did sign up to say that the Russians would no longer target energy infrastructure, providing the Ukrainians signed up to the same, which they did. Now they're talking about extending that to a ceasefire covering the Black Sea, covering shipping operations, so that both sides can reliably run their vessels, run trade through the Black Sea. So that's what they're talking about now. It does seem to many observers that the Russians are rather slow walking this process after Trump raised hopes of a very quick ceasefire a couple of weeks ago.
Right. Let's move on to Greenland. They're not particularly happy there, the administration in Greenland, because the Trump administration is sending the National Security Advisor there this week and the Energy Secretary. And then the Second Lady, Usha Vance, is also going in a separate visit on Thursday. What is all this about?
Well, actually, it's a delegation which is being led by Usha Vance in her first big diplomatic outing, actually, as Second Lady of the United States. We haven't really seen much of her. She's nominally the head of the delegation based on seniority, and is going as part of this group to what it's called a US space base. Actually, there's a big military base in Greenland that's been established for many years. That's become part of US Space Force, and that's why you hear about her sort of leading the trip based on seniority. But of course, going along on the trip is not only the National Security Advisor, but also the Secretary of Energy. Now, why would he be going to Greenland? Well, we know that Trump has expressed in forceful terms that Greenland should belong to America. For its own protection, of course, but also because of its energy reserves.
Right. We have to just move on, only because there is something else we need to acknowledge. But really, in normal times, we might have spent hours discussing what America intends to do with Greenland. Donald Trump likes to get involved with all sorts of things. It does sometimes suggest that he doesn't have a lot on during his average working day, while his minions scuttle around the world doing his bidding, or somebody's bidding. This anger on his part about the portrait of him in the state capitol in Colorado is actually, it's simply hilarious. It's a portrait by a woman called Sarah Boardman, and Trump, apparently with his usual astonishing lack of self-awareness, points out that Sarah Boardman was able to do a really good portrait of President Obama, but has not been able to do a decent one of him, DJ Trump. And he thinks it's because Sarah Boardman's talent has diminished with age. Surely people are laughing about this, David.
Yeah. I think actually the explanation is there wasn't much good on telly last night because Trump was on a bit of a tear on his Truth Social social media site. And this is one of many posts that he made late yesterday evening. It's a portrait that was actually commissioned by a Republican admirer of Trump that's been there since 2019 in the Gallery of the Presidents in the Colorado State Capitol. I'm not sure how it's come to his attention right now, but normally when Trump opines about something, he's very recently had a conversation with someone about it. And so I imagine that somebody has returned from Colorado or pointed out this portrait to him. And it obviously Trump has taken against it, and is, as usual, when he takes against something, it's a full court press. And so he doesn't like the governor anyway, who's a Democratic governor of Colorado. Right. So he's now leaning on that governor to take down the portrait. And of course, this is a little bit of light relief in what is certainly in Washington, D.C., a presidency that's been very hard to laugh and smile about.
Yes, and I just wanted to have a quick word from you on that, actually, in a moment, but I just want to say that it's this line that's the killer line in this post. The artist also did President Obama and he looks wonderful, but the one of me is truly the worst. I mean, who's going to break it to him? Obama is a handsome man. Donald, you're not in the same league. Just accept it.
But also, it means that a portrait that, maybe 112 people might walk past in any 6-month period is now one of the most looked at pictures on the internet today.
It's more famous than the Mona Lisa. You said, David, you hinted there at a sort of melancholy in America at the moment. It's easy for us to be, we're middle-class pinko liberals and we're indignant on behalf of, Britain, actually, with some of the things that Steve Witkoff was saying about our Prime Minister and about the way European democracies and economies are crashing and all the rest of it. Is there despair in some parts of the USA, genuinely, about the direction of all this?
Well, it's this divided nation again, of course. Trump's supporters are largely delighted at the way that he and especially Elon Musk, who is put in charge of cost cutting, are just taking an axe to the federal government. Although it's begun to ripple out into the heartland, and people are realizing that when you cut federal workers, it doesn't just put highly paid and underworked pen pushers in Washington, D.C. out of a job. There's also the people who run the national parks and the presidential libraries and a lot of other, like the Federal Emergency Management Agency, a lot of other agencies that have a lot of outreach in the states out there, and people are losing their jobs in blue states and red states. And it is causing a lot of consternation because people didn't realize that that was what they were voting for. And I have to say, while Trump had a very extensive program, it actually did not convey the extent to which they were going to try and reorganize the entire American state and or federal state. And we've got tariffs to come. Trump's been building up to April the 2nd, which is Liberation Day, when America's going to take in billions and billions and billions of dollars from the foreign countries which have been ripping off America. But the small businesses, they're importers, are frantic out there, and they're desperately trying to get all their supplies in before these tariffs hit.
Thank you very much. That's David Charter, the Times assistant US editor.
For everybody's sake, let's hope that Donald Trump gets stuck into a box set tonight.